Start your day just right. Welcome to Mornings Together with Rob, Mon, and Bernie.
Well, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
It is so good to have you with us this morning.
Yes.
I had a few people comment to us after Tuesday's one where we started off with the hi, friend.
Hi, friend.
Not
Hands.
not fully understanding what was
No.
going on.
Yeah, they're all like, what are those idiots doing?
Yeah, pretty much. We all watched it. We all watched a talk last week as part of the Global Leadership Summit by a lady called Vanessa Van Edwards, who
Yeah.
talked
That's right.
about hand communication.
That's right.
Hi, friend.
Yeah.
How it's important when video calls and things like that. So
Yeah.
that's where that comes from.
We had a long yarn yesterday at morning tea and lunch about that. We're just all calling BS on it because it was just like, what?
Yeah,
There's no
yeah,
way,
yeah.
you know, like,
But your nonverbal cue, she said the open hand is like like a friendly thing. You know?
Yeah. That's the explanation from Tuesday's kind of
There you
crazy opening. We also had some technical stuff as well, but that put us in a funny mood. But it's so good to have you with us on Mornings Together. Today is the 22nd of October. Which
Amazing.
is crazy. Today is
I
the
know.
Feels Thursday.
It's the Feels Thursday.
There it is. And so excited about today's
I know.
conversation.
Can't
I'm completely lost. It's a beautiful day outside.
It's fantastic.
it's supposed to be raining all week. What's the
I know, but it feels like
oh.
summer.
We'll save
morning.
it for Labour weekend.
Oh yeah,
always rains.
Yeah,
on
it'll
Labour
bucket
weekend.
down this weekend for
Yeah.
sure. But yeah, welcome to Morning Together. So the whole point of the show is that it started off in lockdown all the way back on the 26th of March,
That's right.
which is crazy to think. And throughout that first lockdown and level 3 as well, we were doing this every weekday.
Every day.
The intro still says that. I haven't had a chance to change it, mainly because I've lost the file to be able to change it. So every single day we were with you, 9 a.m.
Yep.
Trying to be together when we couldn't actually physically be together.
Right.
Now that we're exploring what does it mean to live in the new normal,
That's right.
as well as some other interesting topics and things like that.
Yeah.
And then on Tuesdays we break down the Sunday messages, which we've been hearing from you guys has been really
I
helpful,
know.
which is
So cool.
cool.
Yeah.
So it's very, very exciting to be here with you guys once
Yeah.
again. Episode 86, which, if you're a Dragon Ball Z fan, was the episode when episode 88. Episode 88 is the episode when Goku and Vegeta fusion for the first time.
Okay.
But that's
Wow.
just a
deep
side
right
point
there.
from
That's
from
like
Bernie.
a whole nother language.
It's a whole nother language. Don't worry about it.
If you're a nerd and you're listening,
Yeah.
You're happy
You'll
right
be
now.
buzzing right
You'll be
Uh,
like, yeah. Hey.
Good morning, Georgia. Sunny day here down
Hey,
in Wellington.
Georgie.
I believe that. And Hannah is saying happy Thursday
Yeah,
as well.
Handy hand.
It is a happy Thursday.
Yeah, it is.
Good on the Feels Thursday. Yes. Sorry, I need to compose myself.
He's very excited
That whole
about
thing
today's
has
guest.
thrown me. So on the Feels Thursday, we have a guest, and as you can
Yeah.
see, we don't have a guest around the table, but that doesn't mean we don't have a guest.
Yeah.
This morning, you have a good friend of mine, Te Karere.
Karere.
Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, bro. I'm really trying. He is with us today, and we're going to be exploring everything that we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about Black Cultural Journey. But let's bring him on just to say howdy. Hey, kia ora, bro. How are you?
Hey.
Howdy.
Howdy.
After all that, howdy.
After all that.
After
Right
all
on,
that,
brother.
Howdy.
It is so good to have you with us this morning. Apologies, I don't know why I'm struggling with the pronunciation of your name so much, but I am. It is so good to have you with us, to korero with us this morning, and I'm so excited for the conversation we're going to have. But for those who are watching, why don't you take a couple of minutes to just introduce yourself to everybody?
Yeah, kia ora mai tātou. Tēnei te mihi ki a koutou. Ngā māngai o tēnei huihuinga. Ko Te Karere Whitiao tōku ingoa, he uri ahau no ngā puhi, no ngā te hauwā hoki. He mihinare Maori ahau, e noho ana ahau I tāmaki mā koutou. My name's Te Karere. I was brought up in the big smoke, Auckland City. But my mother's side is from a little place called Poroti, which is just outside of Whangarei up north. Quite a small community. You know that because there were conversations between the local primary school and our marae in the pub around where the defibrillator should sit. And we all asked the question, what is open the most? And so it ended up at the pub. And so if someone's having a heart attack on the marae, you'll hear someone yell, "Oh, I'm going to the pub!" And actually, they're not running away from their responsibility. They're going to get the defibrillator.
The pub is the
Yeah.
hub.
Steal them.
The pub is the hub.
Yeah, and I've got a biological father who's English. He was brought up in Auckland, so we're third generation English. And I call him my matua whāngai, my stepfather, but he's an amazing man. He's from a place called Ngāti Haua, which is in Waikato, Matamata, Cambridge area, in a little place called Tauwhare. So yeah, that's me, married to Chloe. We've been married, coming up 14 years now, which is awesome for me. I didn't even think I'd get married in the first place. So yeah, was lucky to end up with her, and we've got 3 amazing kids. Paora, who's 12, Mahina, who is 4, and Hinewai, who is 7. So yeah, that's our little world.
Awesome. And you were sharing before the show that you're studying full-time at the moment. Do you want to share a bit more?
So I'm a student at St. John's Theological College. So I've got a 4-year scholarship. Hoping to make it 5 years, where I do a degree in Te Reo Māori, or kura kaupapa Māori teaching, and a degree in theology. We haven't quite figured out how to do theology in Te Reo Māori up here at the college yet. So one of my aspirations is that I'd be able to contribute to that long term.
Which is so exciting.
Sure. Yeah.
So good. For me, I just want to keep asking you questions, but we don't want to get ahead of ourselves because we are going to get into some really good conversation today, which is going to be great. And throughout today, viewers, if you're watching, feel free to chuck your questions into the comment section, and we'll bring them up as we go through. Producer Logan can bring them up because today we'll be exploring this journey, and you in particular have had quite a really cool journey that we'll get to in a little bit. But for now, we're going to back you out, and we'll come back to you in just a little bit. We're just going to do some other housekeeping stuff, and then come back. So, Producer Logan,
catch you soon. Hey up, Quinn.
See you in a bit. So good to have you.
I know, it's so exciting.
I'm so excited.
Yeah.
It's one of these hard things. It's like I just want to just
flag those other
Yeah,
things.
exactly.
Get straight into it. But patience.
Yes, patience.
It's like kids on Christmas
All
Eve.
good things.
All good things come.
That's right.
So we'll get back in a bit to that. But before one of the things we like to do on Thursday is catch-up questions.
Yeah.
Catch-up questions are lighthearted things.
Yeah.
They're not as intense as our instant reaction questions that we do on Tuesdays. They're a bit of fun, and we want your involvement as well as the viewers out there.
Yeah.
Today's question, I think we've done it before.
We have done it before.
But it's always good to revisit.
That's right.
And I can't remember when we did do it and what my answer was last time, so let's go for it.
Although, we did have a question yesterday at Serious Coffee, which I thought was a good question.
Okay, maybe we switch to that.
What, when you were growing up in pop culture, is something that is just really embedded in your memory?
Ooh.
When you were growing up.
So something from pop culture that was really embedded in your memory.
Yeah.
Wow.
For me, it was definitely like what was really big at the time was like surfy puka shells.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. That was like a huge thing. I don't know whether that should make a comeback or not, but it was kind of one of those. I so remember that if you were into skateboarding or surfing or anything, you had puka shells.
I think the thing that strikes me the most is when I was a teenager, like you had the really, really baggy skater jeans, the DC shoes or similar, and like just ridiculous chains that made no sense because half the time they weren't even connected to your wallet.
No.
And like you'd have these crazy big baggy pants and then a really tight t-shirt, which was normally a fluoro color.
Yeah.
I think that's the scathing memory that I have in my head.
People keep texting and calling me while I'm live on air.
Yeah.
My
Fans, leave Rob alone.
Thank you. So for me, growing up in West Auckland, the culture there was generally, do you have a Holden? Are you wearing a black t-shirt? Yes.
Yeah.
And then if you were part Maori like me, it was like, do I hang out with the homies who are listening to Warren G regulate, or am I hanging out with the surfy skaters who were wearing? But the trend was big and baggy, right?
Yeah.
It just looked ridiculous.
It does.
So, Origin jeans were the thing that everyone wanted, and they're just like, they were hideous. They were hideous. Big t-shirts, big hoodies, backwards caps. That was when it started.
And the jeans didn't start at your hips either.
No,
they're always down about a foot late.
Exactly.
Logan, you're a lot younger than us, but what about you? What do you remember?
What do you remember? Like 5 years ago?
For a little bit older than that, Tamagotchis.
Tamagotchis.
And they could die, right?
Yeah.
They could die if you didn't feed them and push that button.
You had to keep them alive, otherwise you
That's
start
right.
again.
That's right. Tamagotchi.
You must be on the
Old
tail end of
school.
Tamagotchi, surely.
Oh yeah, I definitely was. It was definitely when I was a bit younger.
So me and Monica lived during a time where there were no cell phones at school.
It's so weird
Eh?
to think about that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I know.
All the way
Like,
through
how
high
did we
school.
do that?
Yeah.
Like,
It was
how
weird,
did we hung out?
Yeah.
And we talked on
more.
the phone. Yeah, phone conversations on the phone was like a thing. Yeah,
we
that's how you got
we actually
to.
had community.
Yeah, and you dated on the phone and
Yeah.
all that kind of thing.
I think I've shared this in the show. We're watching Friends at the moment.
Yeah,
And it's amazing to watch that show because it started in 95, 94.
yeah,
And it's just carries through to about 2004 kind of thing. And just that era of where so much change happened.
yeah.
And like, in terms of fashion and everything from that
Yeah.
mid-90s,
Oh, yeah.
shoulder pads and
Yeah.
to the early 90s where it was
Yeah.
fluoro and weird patterns. But one of the most striking things that was we were watching last night, and there was one point where one of the actors asked the other one, "So, what year were you born?" And the guy's like, "1968," and you're like, "Wow, that guy's like 50 today." Like,
He's really old.
Yeah, it's
and
like,
like
what?
in the show you watch, they're
Yeah.
like late 30s, and like at that point it made sense. Like, yeah, I was born in 1968, I could be 30.
Yeah, but that show is what? How many years old now? Yeah,
Finished
30.
2003, 2004.
exactly. Yeah.
Anyways,
Crazy.
side tangent. Good
Side
question.
tangent.
Better question than we won't even bring up that one.
No, but it
But I
sparked a
had
lot of
grizzly bears,
conversation.
so just saying.
Grizzly bear.
I had
Yeah.
grizzly bear.
And what I looked like when I arrived in New Zealand, I was going through my Jane Fonda phase because she was
Jane
really
Fonda.
big, but to exercise, I had.
Did you
I
have the
remember.
hair that
I
went out
remember
like
going to New. Yes, I had fair faucet hair.
Yeah, come on.
And not too dissimilar to what I got now. But yeah, but I remember going to New World in Tapuki and someone looking at me. I looked straight out of Orange County. I had slouchy socks with
Oh,
high
come on.
Reeboks,
Yeah.
high
you did.
high tops, and walking in. Someone was
Pumping
like,
through, was like,
"You're not from around here,
She's-
are
no.
you?"
she's from Hollywood.
No.
All right, let's press
looked
on because we want to get back to our guest.
Yes.
The Bruce line is important today.
Bruce Lee.
Yeah.
So chuck your comments in there. Things from pop culture when you're growing up that resonate in your mind. Game Boys was another one for me as well.
Game
Everybody
Boys.
had
There
Game
we
Boy and
Yeah.
scooters when I was
Scooters,
younger.
yeah.
But we're gonna throw things now over for a bit of. I think it's gonna get a little bit spicy, a little bit saucy. Time for flavor, Rob.
Yeah.
You ain't gonna understand this flavor.
Raw.
Come on,
Baby!
Rob. What'd you got for us?
What I got for you? Well, it is summer, and shockingly, it is summer.
Yeah.
Yes, it
Today
I feel like
feels
summer.
like summer.
Today looks like summer.
Yeah.
And we're heading into that season where we're in our backyards
Yeah.
or at the beach, and we need to change our tack with food.
Yeah.
And so I was wrestling with a couple of things because there's, I talked last week about smoky meats and getting the barbecue out, but the
Yeah.
other thing that people have on their barbecue nowadays is a pizza stone.
Yeah.
And you don't need to go out and buy a fancy pizza
No.
stone. You
No.
can just buy a piece of granite.
Yeah,
You just shove
they're
that thing on
everywhere.
there.
Yeah.
And the whole point of that is getting that thing screaming hot
Yeah.
and then sticking your pizza on and closing the lid. And you get that smoky flavor in there. Ooh, goodness. So a pizza dough recipe and an encouragement to get green with some salads and some veggies.
Yeah.
What?
I know. He said, what? Forget those salads.
Yeah.
You don't
last-
make friends of salad.
You don't make friends. We were having a bit of a laugh the other night because Dave Andrew, one of our elders, invites us around. And last year we had these steaks, and all the boys are standing around, and there was literally steak, sauces for the steak, a beer, and nothing else. There were no greens. There was no potatoes. There was nothing. It's just these steaks that were
Just meat.
Just steak.
Anyway,
Amazing.
Sauce.
so good pizza dough is very easy to make, and I always
Yeah.
want to encourage people to make it with yeast.
Mm.
It just makes it a fluffier
Yeah.
dough in it. But the whole point of having a stone is that the bottom doesn't get soggy. No one wants soggy
No one-
bottoms on their pizza.
Yeah, exactly.
And there's two things about that is number one, don't put too much stuff on top of the pizza,
Yeah.
and then actually having something screaming hot underneath it that you
Right.
put it on and just
To crisp up that bun.
instantly. So a pizza dough is real easy. 3 or 4 pizzas that are about 20 centimeters. You want 400 grams of flour, about 300 grams of warm water.
Yeah.
300 mils of warm water, a teaspoon of that dry yeast,
Yep.
and a big tablespoon of caster sugar because that feeds the yeast and gets
Yeah.
it going. So you whisk
Gets it
that up,
bubbling.
and then you sit it there until you just see it bubbling. Shove it all together, knead it out, or
Yeah.
I usually put it all in a Kenwood mixer and just let it knead it for about 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Just get that gluten going. Then you want to set it aside in a warm place for about 45 minutes. It rises and then it's ready to go.
Yeah.
You don't need to do that twice. It's pizza dough, for
Yeah.
goodness sake. And then you just, you can do all sorts of things. So you've got your basic pizzas you can do, but you can take a piece of that dough, roll it nice and flat, shove some garlic butter in the middle of that, and some cheese, roll it up, bang it in the oven. You've got yourself the best garlic bread. You know, you can grab really simple things, chuck in some olive oil, crushed salt, some olives, all this kind of stuff, and then all of a sudden you've got yourself a focaccia. So it's a really versatile dough, and you can use it for all sorts of things. And I just want to encourage you, get out, give it a go. Dough is a good thing.
It's great.
It's enjoyable.
And homemade pizzas are always so much better than anything you'll order in. Like,
Exactly.
hands down, fresh from the oven, homemade thing.
Yeah.
Even if it's just simple, bit of ham and cheese.
I saw producer Logan yesterday eating those $5 nasty pizzas.
Yeah, don't do that to yourself, producer Logan.
Right.
You want to live
Better,
long and
better
prosper,
living,
my
everybody.
friend.
Don't
But I
eat.
do have a question.
$5.
Yes. Question.
If you didn't have time to make the dough,
That's easy. Come on.
Come on.
if you didn't have time,
Yes.
what base would you get? What's a great
So
pizza base?
A great pizza bases are available, obviously, and I would use Lebanese bread.
Yes.
If you like,
yeah.
if you like it quite thin, but I would butter that sucker up on the bottom so it crisps to the bottom. So a good Lebanese bread. There are some pizza bases out there that I would say once you get them, just roll them, get them thinner, and then they'll puff back up again. But some of them are just like big old pieces of bread.
Yeah,
not
they
very
are.
good. But Lebanese bread.
We do I think it's similar. It's the Turkish bread one, so it's almost like it's close to naan state, almost like that, but it crisps up real nice. Don't buy anything Pam's because it's just going to hurt your gut later on. You know, get those nice thin and crispy ones.
So good.
But doing homemade pizza dough is like
pizza dough.
awesome.
Yeah, but if you can't, just get those bases.
Get those bases.
Get the nicer bases.
Just have them because you like to have like something in the freezer you can just drag out and do real quickly.
And throwback to another Rob tip: always chuck the base in on the stone first, then pull it out, then put your toppings in, and then put it back in again.
That's
piping hot. Yeah,
this guy.
He's been listening.
I've been listening.
We've
been doing pizza nights throughout lockdown at our house because of these tips. And we have pizza
next week. I'll do greens. All right.
That's
right. I promise I will do greens.
Pizzas are great. You can sneak. Greens.
He said what?
We'll use that on that one, I think.
But pizzas are great because you can hide all the veggies in there.
Yeah.
Put some cheese on it, and there you go.
It's a classic mum.
Yeah. This is true. There are vegetables I like on pizza that I won't like in any other context.
Yeah.
Come on.
Well, thank you, Flavor Rob.
You ain't gonna understand this flavor, Rob. Baby.
Oh goodness. Always good to have Flavor Rob. I think just to have that jingle alone makes it worth it every single time.
It's like when he walks in, that song is playing in his head.
I kind of wish we had a little bumper that would come up, and it would just be you strutting down like a.
I want to do a competition for the people out there who know who the singer of that original music is.
Yeah.
All right. So we might send you out a nice mornings together.
Mornings together.
We haven't done a giveaway in a long time.
You have to be almost as old as me to know who that is.
Yeah.
Yeah, comment on the thing or send us a message if you know who that is.
That's right.
I'm pretty sure Te Karere will know who that is.
I'm pretty sure he will. All right, so housekeeping stuff. So please send through your stories to us. We love hearing them. We love seeing your pictures.
For sure.
I got a picture from Hannah last night.
Oh, nice.
But I haven't had a chance to load it in there.
Yeah.
Of where was it? Newlands in Wellington?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, looking
lovely sunset in Newlands last night.
Oh, beautiful.
But fire those through us. We love seeing them. We do share them on the show. Sorry, Hannah, that I didn't load yours up in time.
Yeah.
But yeah, send them through stories, bethlehem.org.nz, even if it's just comments or questions, feedback about how we're doing, how things are tracking. We do only have 14 episodes left.
Crazy.
So if you want to speak up about something, now is your time.
Yeah.
Because after episode 100,
she gone.
It's all done. You can follow us and tag us on social media at Beth Bap Church, so on Facebook and Instagram. You can follow the church and what they're doing. Lots of updates and things come through there. If you need any help at all, or you want to be involved in the church care department, care at bethlehem.org.nz, or give the church a call on 075762344. Awesome team there who love to help you in any way you need help. We also love to pray for you and lift you up in prayer and celebrate with you as well. So chuck the number 4040 into your phone, keyword BBC prayer, then your message will come through to us. And the team prays regularly throughout the week. You can also do a prayer card on Sundays, or there's an online chat portal as well, where you can chuck your prayer requests in there as well. Speaking this weekend, you can join us in person at 9 o'clock, 11 a.m. and 6:30 p.m. The morning two services, a looking at Prodigal Church, which is an exploration of 1 Corinthians.
Yep.
Rob is preaching.
Yeah,
I am
Rob.
indeed.
On the gifts.
On the gifts of the Spirit.
On the
Right
gifts.
I know. It's controversial.
So show up. It's going to be good.
Yeah, exactly.
And then 6:30 p.m. we got Michael Brown sharing in the second week of Come and See, looking at First John. So come along in person if you can, but if you can't, we can watch online on all the platforms you're currently watching. So that's Facebook, that's YouTube, and that's the church website. Love to have you interacting and joining with us there. Ask some curly questions for our executive pastor who'll be hosting.
Oh, come on.
It's like a mini challenge. Like,
I love it.
Can you stump Kyle?
That's right. Give him some curls.
I don't think you will. But and then finally this morning you can listen back to all of these episodes that we've done, all 86 of them. This one will go live mid-morning there as well on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Just search Mornings Together and you can listen back, or you can watch back on Facebook and YouTube as well. All these things are possible. But thank you for joining us anytime it is in which you are listening. A warm welcome to those who are joining later in the day. It's great to have you around the virtual campfire where the banter is always good, the chatter is always warm and rich, but you have to bring your own snacks.
That's right.
But apart from that, everything is
We're going to have to start calling it the beach bonfire.
That's right.
Yeah.
Beach bonfire.
I actually had an example of this happen yesterday, the virtual campfire. I was going about my business in the afternoon, and all of a sudden I get a text from Rochelle de Mullen, who was listening later on in the day yesterday, and she's like, Bernie, you're a Grinch. Because she just listened to Tuesday's episode where I said that Christmas music should be exclusively a 24th and 25th of December thing.
No,
so
come on.
There you go. That's an example that the virtual campfire burns all the time.
Everybody heard that.
Everybody heard that. Oh, all right. Let's get to Karere back on.
Let's
go.
Welcome back, bro.
Hey.
Kia ora.
Go.
Now, do you have any comments around pop? Was it pop?
Yeah, pop culture from when you were growing up.
Yeah.
Look, I definitely love nostalgia. I was feeling Rob and the Origin jeans. Those were, but there was this thing. I went to quite a rich intermediate school, and so we went from wearing like all the warehouse boxes, which were just like they were actually just Christmas candy things on kind of terrible satin boxes, and like we tried to step our game up. And get something called Devonport boxes. They were like the cream, and so the idea is that you would actually, it was a fashion accessory. People would see your silky.
That's right.
Although like as someone born in the mid '80s, Transformers was the first cartoon that was ever created solely to sell product. And so that was the year I was born, 85. So I am the child of consumerism in that way, that I ate those suckers up because that was the go.
That's the business.
That's totally true. As someone who's born in '89, so not long after that, absolutely. Yeah. Transformers, all that kind of stuff. It was the toys.
That's right.
So good.
If it didn't turn into anything, it was like, what's wrong with this toy?
Yeah, exactly.
Totally.
If you could make a toy of it, you'd probably.
I know.
Was wrong.
I remember my nephew, we had the nativity set out, and he picked up the baby Jesus, and he says, "Does he do anything?" It's like, you need to save the world, exactly.
All right, we're talking into an action figure tangent. Even though we easily could we avoided a boxes tangent there briefly as well, which is briefly.
I love how you guys knew exactly what he was.
Oh, absolutely, because it was a thing in high school.
With the lads.
There was a status thing. What boxes did you have on display? It was like almost like a status thing. All right. So Te Karere, I remember. I don't remember how long it was ago, but you made quite a strong Facebook post where you were saying that you were signaling this change that you were going on in this journey into exploring more Te Reo and Maori culture, and you signaled it by saying that you've changed your name from Zane, which is what I knew by many moons ago when we last used to hang out, to Te Karere. Do you want to explain that journey that led to that?
Yeah, would love to. So, as we've seen kind of in the different names that God uses to describe his character to us, as well as just names throughout all cultures, they imbibe identity and culture. And so when I asked my mum in my early 20s, what was the deeply significant reason you called me Zane in the mid 80s? She said, I really like the letter Z. And I was like, wow. Now, what's funny is that for Māori culture, names was actually really, really important. And so a part of the assimilateist regime was actually for people to take on foreign names, because that was a way of kind of stamping out some of those identity markers. So a part of the name change was actually just a decolonizing process. Now, my mum was a single mum for a long time, and so she gave me that name. I felt like she was the one who had the permission to change it or not. So I actually asked her by my mid-20s, I said, Mum, I'd like to change my name. She'd gone through the same process herself. She was born Whitiao, changed it to Rewan to anglicize it for to get a job and all of that stuff, and then went back to Whitiao in her 40s. So she'd been through the process, but the funny thing about names is that you give them meaning. Now you imbue them with meaning, and so she's very sentimental about it. It took her 5 years to agree to change my name. And after those 5 years happened, she said, okay, let's explore some names together. So we spent about 2.5 years exploring different names. And she would bring up a particular name about a sacred place or a major event that had happened in our history. And it was more about going, oh, wow, this is just a cool process rather than the end product. The funny story goes, I said to my mum, a lot of Maori names are androgynous, but her name is a female name. And I said to her, I'd like to take her name on because of the significance that she's had in my life. She was really overwhelmed by that. But I forgot to talk to a particular stakeholder in my life, and that was my wife. And so when I told her that I was changing my name to her mother-in-law's name, she said, bro, that's just weird. And I got offended. And I said, what do you mean it's weird? She said, I don't want to sleep with Whitiao. Which was actually a fair point, but I didn't acknowledge that it was fair at that time because I was still like, you're stamping on the mother of my mother. So about a month later, we didn't talk about it. And in my stubbornness, I said to her a month later, I'm going to do it, babe. This really matters a lot to me. And she said, okay, I'll support you based on this one condition. And this is how clever my wife is. She goes, I will call you Whitiao if you call me my father's name, Ellen. And and I actually thought about it. I thought about the kind of pillow talk that Ellen and Whitiao would have, and I was like, nah, that is weird. And so it got relegated to a middle name, and then eventually the name came out of Te Karere, which was the name of my stillborn brother who passed away. So Te Karere, which is the name of the Maori news, means message or messenger. And the reason he got called that is because he was the only stillborn child between my mother and my stepfather. And so they had no other children. They were unable to. And the news of his passing, because of their significance in our community, happened so fast, he got called Te Karere. And I wanted to, I ended up being gifted and wanted to take on that name as a way of signifying I want to live out all of the dreams that he was unable to, especially within this kind of cultural reclamation space that I find myself. So yeah, that's the journey of the name.
That's so cool. And
beautiful.
It's wow. I love that, and it speaks to what you said at the end. This cultural reclamation, which is the journey that you're on, and I'm loving seeing on Facebook the comics you're doing, and also you're part of a Parenting Place video, I think, on Te Reo Māori Week, talking about how to foster te reo with children and stuff like that. Cool. And you mentioned as well, like part of this journey is living out the hopes and dreams for your stillborn brother and things like that. What are some of the bigger outcomes of this journey that you're on in terms of cultural reclamation for you personally, but also your hopes for people that you're encountering with?
Yeah, I mean, look, there are a whole bunch of different motivations that are, political motivations or social motivations about the well-being and flourishing of Maori culture. But actually, the thing that drives me is a theological conviction, and that's God has created and speaks powerfully through culture, not just in spite of it. And so to be who God has called me, and I would say anyone who lives at the bottom of the South Pacific, to honor what it means to be us in time and place in this part of the world is to ask, what does it mean to live out of our cultural paradigm? And so it's almost like doing a disservice to who I was created to be, not to learn Te Reo Māori, speak Te Reo Māori, bring my kids up with the multiplicity of worldviews that'll help them to understand and express who they are in all of those different cultures. Yeah. So, anything other than that, I think, is to not is to not be made in God's image. Yeah, so that's the deep kind of why. Outside of that, I don't know. Pick a statistic and what isn't going so flash for Maori culture, and there are a whole bunch of justice reasons there which can follow up, and political reasons around honouring the covenant that was made in 1840. All of those reasons, but deep down, actually, it's this foundational idea around being made in God's image.
Yeah,
that's
it's
so good.
So good.
So we're broadcasting this from Tauranga, and of course Tauranga's got a really rich history of Christian missionaries interacting with the local iwi, and they're working together. And then of course when the British came in and separated those two, causing division and chaos and all that. That's a terrible summary, but in a nutshell, that's the history of the place that we find ourselves and where we're broadcasting from. And we see in New Zealand history this huge influence the early Christian missionary had with the Maori people. They immersed themselves. They built relationships with each other. There's a lot of talk around the idea of Aotearoa's bicultural journey, not only within the church but in the secular world as well. But from a Christian perspective, what is our obligation or what is our responsibility to engage in Aotearoa's bicultural journey?
Yeah, I mean that's a really good question, an important question for us as the body of Christ, and I mean you need to start with the story, which is Aotearoa was one of the final places in terms of people groups for the specific revelation of Jesus to find itself. And that happened at a particular time in the expansion of the British Empire, where they were like, Africa, Sierra Leone, yeah, we didn't really do a good job over there. I know, what about India? Not really. Australia? Nah, we didn't do a good job there either. And so whether you call it, providential reasons, or it was just kind of luck of the draw, the Clapham sect, the Aboriginal Protection Society, missionaries were saying, we can't just go and do to New Zealand the same that we've done to all of these other Indigenous peoples, which is a civilizing mission. Our culture is the most godly and pure. Your culture isn't. Therefore, we have the right to assert who we are in terms of our faith and also in terms of our laws. And so, a lot of non-Maori miss out on this completely revolutionary idea that one of the most powerful countries in the world were looking to the way that it was interacting with all these other colonies and saying, it's actually not good enough. And so that's the context in which the missionaries were found themselves, and they were interacting with Maori culture with. And so the Treaty of Waitangi was actually a way of protecting Indigenous peoples, natives, Meki, was a way of protecting them rather than just having this powerful assimilationist policy come through and rip them off again. Like, that's our heritage. That if you belong to a faith community, if you identify with the faith community, that is one of the most amazing things that you could draw on in terms of who you are and why it matters. Now, in saying that, one of the problems with who we are as humans in a postmodern Western context is we actually believe this idea that, we invent our own meaningfulness. So that stuff that happened way before doesn't affect me because I buy my identity through the labels that I have, or through the friends that I choose, or the posts that I put up on Facebook. This is the first time in human history we've actually believed the idea that we can define our own meaningfulness. And what that does is it cuts us off from some of those responsibilities, I would say, in the past, and the accountability, but also the idea that actually we have a part in a wider story. So that's why it matters for us as Christians, because we were there at the inception of the founding of the Treaty of Waitangi, which is the foundation of our country. And there's a whole lot of rich history there for us to continue to unfold and actually buy into, to serve as, I would say, a light on a hill.
Yeah, that's so good. Yeah. And it speaks to the bigger narrative that we find ourselves in as Christians, like you see through the Old Testament and the New Testament, the scriptures around, God's people being one that welcome the neighbors, be kind, love on one another, going and accepting your neighbors as brothers rather than the conquering and assimilation kind of thing. That there's a bigger narrative that we see in scripture, the idea of redemption versus confirmation. You know, and so that speaks into the story of Aotearoa as well, and with those early missionaries when they came with that mindset of, okay, how do we work together for the redemption of these people rather than how do we make them like us?
Totally. Well, you know, from a Maori perspective, we never saw it as a contract, a legally binding contract. The particular word was kawanatanga, and that means covenant. And it was literally taken out of a biblical concept of a covenant between two peoples. And so, you know, for Maori, we can't help but be political and we can't help but be spiritual, because we didn't just kind of separate our lives like that. The treaty was a political and especially spiritual covenant. And so it's like a double blow when people don't acknowledge it or try and live up to those aspirations, because we still believe that it holds that mana, that tapu, that ihi, that wihi, that sacredness. And so for other people not to see that sacredness, but to benefit from the wrongdoings that happened because the covenant was broken is, a bit of a slap in the face sometimes.
Absolutely, and it's an important thing you raised there about cultural perspective. You know, my wife is studying to be a counselor at the moment, and she's currently doing some work around this. And so we were talking about it yesterday, and how, you know, different cultural perspectives alter the way you interact with one another. And, you know, as Pākehā, a lot of the time we can, you know, see it as like, this is here and this is that. We segment lives, and we say, I go to church, we compartmentalize. Like, this is one way over here, but I'm, you know, whereas what you're sharing about the Maori people is that it is all together, and that's a beautiful thing that we have to keep thinking about and maintaining that perspective of understanding. Otherwise, it is just like, well, we made a contract to get access to land, you know, we're living up to our part of the agreement kind of thing, but it's actually, that's falling short of the covenant that you speak to, in terms of the way we're actually supposed to be interacting with the people of the land.
Absolutely.
So moving on to the next question then. A lot of people, and we talked about this briefly a number of weeks ago, but a lot of people will say, why a bicultural journey? Why isn't it a multicultural journey for New Zealand? Because, you know, we've got people here from China, from South Africa, Americans, you know, there's a hugely diverse cultural landscape here in New Zealand. Why does it keep coming back to the idea of a bicultural journey?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I think from a Maori perspective, and this hardly gets articulated, but from a Maori perspective, the idea of tangata whenua or mana whenua is that your mana or prestige comes from the ancestors who were guardians over particular places. And so the term Pākehā, even though it's designated as kind of a British European, actually for Māori will often mean anyone else. So it's kind of like a Māori and anyone else. So there's a couple of different ways that's important to think about it. Māori made an agreement between the different chiefs or rohe or iwi and tribes and the crown. So that's a very bicultural relationship between, you know, what is essentially a British parliamentary system and Māori. So that is very bicultural. And if, you know, we have our amazing Indian whānau, or, I mean, Chinese actually been here since the 1800s, so they've been here a long, long time. Or, you know, newer immigrants, they can't really speak into stuff that happened in 1840 or 1850 because of that gap there. However, when I think about present or future, it is multicultural, but it's Māori and then kind of everyone else, or the people who have ancestry to those Indigenous people, and then everyone else who has been brought here through the doorway of the treaty. I actually pre-prepared a quote because I think we miss the opportunity to see the treaty as the deep foundation that everyone can stand on. And if you have a look at what I would call the Pākehā identity crisis, which is we were a part of the British Empire for a long time, and then in the 1950s, they were like, we'd rather choose Europe over you as our preferred trade partner. We kind of got thrown into this real insecurity around what it means to be Pākehā in this country. So here's a really, really cool quote by Judge Edward Jury, and he terms this phrase tangata te tiriti. He goes, we must also not forget that the treaty is not just a Bill of Rights for Māori, it is a Bill of Rights for Pākehā too. It is the treaty that gives Pākehā the right to be here. Without the treaty, there would be no lawful authority for the Pākehā presence in this part of the South Pacific. The Pākehā here are not like the Indians in Fiji or the French in New Caledonia. Our Prime Minister can stand proud in Pacific forums and in international forums too, not in spite of the treaty, but because of it. we must remember that if we are the tangata whenua, he's Māori himself, the original people, then the Pākehā are the tangata tiriti, those who belong to the land by right of that treaty. The treaty is a doorway, not for something to be pushed aside. It is actually the foundation for what the trajectory of our country should have been and still can be.
Still can be, and that's the important point. Is it still can be? Because this is a thing that can be restored. It can be imbibed in the people who are in the country at the moment. But it's just this need for this understanding. Sorry, I feel like I'm dominating the conversation.
No, it's great. I'm learning too. Yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely. I've never heard the treaty put like that.
Yeah,
that we're here. It's been a doorway.
Yeah,
that I've been able to be part of New Zealand, and my husband too, who family immigrated from the UK and from Ireland. Yeah, that we're here because of the treaty. Yeah.
How do you feel, Te Karere, about how globalization is actually transforming people's view of the treaty as well? Because I think historically we have some really rich, quotes like what you're just sharing. Some really rich stuff to draw on. But today, with the things bringing in different values within even Pākehā culture, how is globalization changing Maori culture?
Yeah, look, I mean, the adaptability of Māori to have survived what was once coined fatal impact, but now we have much more strengths-based ways of talking about the overwhelming forces and power of, colonization. I mean, we're still here. Bro, you're still here. This is still something that matters. And, we don't just thank a few Pākehā missionaries for that. That is the kaha, the strength of our ancestors who stood up to the most powerful empire in the world and said, we still matter and we won't forget the stories. There's a resilience there. In saying that though, I think the challenge for Māori is that we haven't been able to adapt on our terms. Let's take language, for example. So there's a whole bunch of language policies that were enacted by the New Zealand government to extinguish Māori language and Māori culture. And so, we're talking 100, 120 years worth of intentional ways of getting rid of the culture. So let's have a look at language acquisition at the moment. Under 20% of Māori are able to speak Te Reo Māori. And in my own whānau, it's less than half of that. So 6 generations down, I will be the 8th or 9th person at the end of this year who can speak Te Reo Māori. And so the challenge for us is amongst a world of priorities, how do we as Māori, as well as non-Māori, kind of get this cultural reclamation to the top of the heap? Because there is a direct link between Māori culture and Māori well-being. So Māori who don't have their culture often do worse than Māori who do have their culture on a whole bunch of the ways that we as Māori assess well-being. So it's not just health and education, but it's well-being, connectedness to land, it's culture, it's connectedness to being a part of a wider story, mental health. There are these other cultural paradigms which we actually have assessed ourselves by that are our own, and our relationship to the culture is the way that we improve those things. And so it's a real challenge for us in light of all of these other cultural pressures to try and make that the main thing all the time. And it's hard when churches, that they just don't care about it. It just doesn't even feature on their agenda. Think about New Conservative, their treaty policies in this upcoming election were to get rid of the treaty, which is politically, historically, and theologically correct. I'm like, it's a triple whammy. And so it can feel like you're fighting a battle uphill to fight those global pressures. But we're adaptive and survivors, bro. So I do have faith that we will continue to, build and strengthen our culture. But yeah, it's not easy, and I don't think we can do it without non-Māori actually.
You're speaking to this idea of this global assimilation where we all become this collective hive mind. There's not, we should all agree the same. We should all do the same. We should all prosper the same kind of thing. And so that speaks to a deconstruction of this idea of identity. The fact that it is actually multiple identities that make up the populace of the world, and that's a good thing because it's when you have those different viewpoints that you actually have a really rich really rich society. You know, kind of thing. It's important.
Yeah. And look, I'll just say there is a I would say a theological mandate to push into Indigenous perspectives. Have a look at all the isms: consumerism, materialism, individualism. The Indigenous perspective has so much to say in critiquing those major forces in globalization. And so as much as we want to take on board things that are helpful, can Pākehā New Zealand culture, does it have the foundation to reject that? I don't think it does. It's caught up in it. It's completely enculturated by these ideas. So Indigenous perspectives, and specifically Maori perspectives, I think show us more of God's heart in this conversation than some of our pretty crazy ideas at the moment.
Yeah. I think it's a nice way of putting it. So there are some pretty crazy ideas out there that, you know, and I think people, you know, we forget a lot of the time how strong and pervasive secularism is in a lot of our thinking and a lot of our cultures, because we bend to the wills of the time, right, or the themes of the time, rather than with what you're speaking to, understanding our heritage and you know where we come from. And you know, I'm studying theology this semester as well, and exploring the scriptures from creation through to now, and seeing the links in the things that are built upon one another and the traditions we have today that are built upon other things. It's really important, because if we don't have that, the secularism like just is insidious, and can get in there and can bend the way you do things subtly, to the point that you're actually out of alignment with what God actually would want you to do, or perspectives or ways you think and feel about it. And so that's what I love about what you're sharing about, you know, Māori culture and the heritage of it, because they keep retelling the story, they keep knowing where they've come from, they keep understanding the significance of these things, and that helps guide them. It's like a compass, you know, and it's important, because it keeps you on track, it keeps you heading in the right direction, it keeps you valuing the correct things. It's hugely important in a world where it's like, define your own way, make your own way.
Totally.
You can do whatever you want. Be your own person, kind of thing.
I mean, it's a cliche example, but you know, whenever I meet a Pākehā, the first thing they say is, "What do you do? What do you do, bro?" But if I was to meet Rob in real life, our conversation would start, "Where are you from? Where are you from?" And those two different questions are the doorways into completely different ways of finding meaning for ourselves. And if your relationship is to the land and or genealogy and story, it goes that way in time to the past, but it also goes that way to the future in terms of being a steward of those places and those relationships. And so, powerful, man. I love being Maori, because it challenges some of my own internal ideas as I've bought into and adopted other cultural expressions that I'm a part of too. I'm proud to be Pākehā as well.
So this is a question I want to throw at you, Barry. I don't think it's in there, but how has being Maori changed the way that you do theology? Because from a Maori worldview, you look at some scriptures very differently, the way that you value whānau, whanaunatanga, all these different things. How has being Maori changed the way? Because I got a couple of mates, one who's done a master's recently. He also has changed his name to Rawiri. I've got another friend, Rangiaru, who's changed his name as well. They're all on this journey, but they look at scripture and theology very differently. Can you share a little bit about how it might have changed how you see it?
Yeah, I mean, I was watching the new version of Jump Street. The police officers, Ice Cube, and that they're in this Korean church, and there's this crack up scene where one of the characters is praying to a Korean church, to a Korean Jesus, and he says this, "Korean Jesus, do you even care about me? I don't know. Am I allowed to pray to a Korean Jesus? I'll just pray anyways." And it was hilarious for a few different reasons. The first one is, it was really confronting to see what someone else's projection of who Jesus is front and center in a way that I wouldn't necessarily look at like a Pākehā Jesus, you know. And so to see a Korean Jesus was like, oh wow, that's an Asian face there. So it really had me asking the questions, when we as cultures project onto Jesus who we think he is, how much of that should we do and how much of that shouldn't we do? And the answer is, that actually that's an important part of understanding who Jesus wants to be in our time and place. That a part of it is just not emptying ourselves of all of our cultural assets and whakaaro and thoughts and culture. It's about Jesus entering into those places and saying, this is what redemption, this is what my redeeming work of my life, death and resurrection looks like in this context. And so I've started projecting who or what is a Maori Jesus too. What does Jesus want to say through a Maori paradigm? And that's a really powerful kind of twist. There was Hebrew. Jesus spoke Aramaic. A lot of the the early fathers of the church were speaking Greek. Then it went to Latin, as well as a whole bunch of different European cultures. And then there was English, and it made it here to Maori. All of those languages in themselves carried a different essence of who God was revealing. And so I'm not afraid of projecting my Maoriness onto Jesus. He's big enough for that, is probably one of the things. The other thing is you just ask different questions. Like, most people skip over the whakapapa and the genealogy at the start of Matthew or in the Old Testament. I'm like right in there. Like, why was it so important for these links to make sense for the story of the people of Israel? The other thing is this, is like concept of migration. So there was between, Exodus and Egypt initially, through, the 40 years wandering in the desert, to the establishment of Israel. I was in a class of Old Testament students, and there was only one Pākehā in there. And the thing that we were interested in is, what was that migration journey look like? We wanted to know more than anything, how did a culture go from patriarchy or multiple gods or different versions of spirituality to monotheism, one God? What was that journey? Pākehā didn't really want to explore that. They just took it for granted. That's what happened. But for me, I was like, what are the steps that had to take in order for people to go that way? Because that's one of the central questions facing us. So, you ask different questions, you explore different parts of the Bible, and, hopefully you come up with different answers. If the peak of theological thought happened in Greek, in Constantine's kind of empire, and there's nothing more to add on top of that, then, why has everyone continued to unpack and unfold theological ideas? Is because they add to the conversation. And I think the Indigenous voice, world majority theology out of Latin America, India, Africa, Asia's got some amazing theologians at the time, can say some things that can critique Western theology. So sorry, I'm ranting again, but that's my answer, bro.
It's good.
Preach, brother.
I was just thinking, like, this. It speaks to the theological idea of Imago Dei. All are created in the image of God, and so in all of humanity, there's a reflection of who God is, and that you can't exclude cultures and perspectives in that. Like, you have to incorporate the Indigenous perspective. You have to incorporate the Asian perspective, because this is who God is, and this is the way He works with His people. He comes to us and says, "You've known it as this. Let me show you the bigger picture of what you've been doing and what that relates to in terms of who I am." That's the message you see again and again in Scripture. And since the authorship of the Bible, it's what you see in Christian culture, is this understanding that we are a reflection of who God is, and and so there's
the bigger story,
and the body of the church is different assets.
Totally. And, it just, I'll challenge you guys as a whānau, unless there is a serious commitment to a multiplicity of views, then often this idea of multiculturalism or biculturalism is just a farce. How are feminist perspectives really influencing the way that we read and see Scripture? Indigenous perspectives and lenses around leading that. Pacific, you've got Asian, you've got liberation theology around the systems, not just us as individuals, but us in a wider system that punishes people for being different. This is a lot of people get scared around all these other perspectives challenging orthodoxy. I'm like, all of these other people excited just to be at the table to have conversation, and I think they can contribute a lot to what it means to be human and to understand who God has called us to be in relationship to one another, to the earth, and to Him.
It's so important. And we were talking about this on Tuesday. We were reflecting on an Albert Tate quote from the summit last week about, what table are you sitting at? Are there people missing from the table you're sitting with? Or do you need to flip the table and start a new one with the people that are supposed to be at the right table, kind of thing? it's an important conversation.
I love
to keep
that, to
having.
ask that question.
You have
Who's
to,
missing
yeah.
from your table?
Or if you set up
Yeah.
protocol that purposely excludes certain
Yeah.
people from attending at the table.
Yeah.
Or are you sitting at the table of injustice?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And you need
And
to
not
get up
even
and
aware
move.
that you are.
All
You
right,
know what I mean?
I'm highly aware of the time. We're
Yeah.
about to start running over, but I have a very important final question.
Here we go.
So we've talked a lot this morning. It's been a great conversation. How do we put practical legs to this?
Yes.
If we, as
Yeah.
Pakeha, want to involve ourselves in this bicultural journey, or if we want to involve ourselves in Te Reo Māori,
Absolutely.
what are some practical first steps that we can take?
Yeah, I mean, look, the question I would ask before the practical step is, to whose benefit are these practical steps? Because if you think saying a few Te Reo Māori words to the one Maori listener you've got, I'm completely projecting here, but I'm just, let me go, is for their benefit, for them to feel more included, I'm unsure if that is going to result in that. The truth around our motivations is twofold. There is, what does it look like for me to honor this history and to imbue my own identity and us as a people group with this history? And then there is another question, which is, and what does it look like for us to do this to someone else's, especially Maori benefit? Because if you're not with Maori saying, what does it look like for us to honor these relationships or this history or whatever, then you're once again taking the decision making out of their hands and saying, here is my answer to your challenge. So to whose benefit is a really big question. Yeah. Practically, if you are a church, stop trying to save or evangelize Maori. That's probably the easiest thing I can say. And the reason I say that, no, I'm not throwing the Great Commission out the window. I'm saying the story in this country was missionaries working with a few tribes, and those tribes going out and evangelizing Maori. So there's this deeply rooted suspicion of non-Maori evangelizing Maori. So leave it for Maori to evangelize Maori. I'm not saying don't talk to Maori, don't engage in iwi relationships. I'm saying if your single job is to go there and proselytize, there is a lot of baggage there. And maybe after 15 years on your journey, let's have that conversation. But let your actions actually say more than anything else. Yeah. So that leads me on to don't do what you should do. First thing, invest in Maori theologians. If you have people at your church and they want to get into theology and they want to do it from an Indigenous perspective, go and support them. Look, there can't just be me or Jay Ruka or Brad Harmey going around every church in the country. Actually, you need to develop your own people internally. And what that means is saying, if you want to, we're going to say 4 to 6 years worth of study for you. We're going to pay for that. And if at the end of that journey, you don't want to still stay in this church because it's too hard for you, and actually you're so aware of all of these challenges now in our church and we haven't moved far enough that you say, I just want to go help my iwi, you have to be willing to risk that. Okay, so invest in Maori scholarship and cultural scholarship, Te Reo Māori. Outside of that, read Hui Come Home by Jay. It is a wonderful resource as a first step. Study Te Reo Māori as a window to seeing Te Reo Māori. Don't use the Maori worldview as a Trojan horse for your faith either. It has its own mana and respect by itself, and so engage it on its terms. If you think Jesus is scared about you entering a different cultural paradigm, you don't have to take on board all of that stuff. But if you want to understand the story, the language is a big part of that. And then the classic thing, make sure that your church, you as individuals and you as a whānau are bringing the kingdom of heaven to earth by helping to do the unjust structures, paradigms, and ways of being that undermine Indigenous peoples. And so that's my quick fire list of things that you shouldn't do and you should be doing practically.
Awesome, love it,
dude. We could spend another hour talking about this stuff. It's so important. Like it's a conversation that needs to happen and keep happening. Thank you so much for your time with us this morning. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate. And I love the journey that you're on. I'm excited for what you are a messenger. You are. What you've brought to us this morning is a gift. And I just want to. I don't want to move on from this place too quickly before I let everything land where it needs to land. And the lessons I need to take and need to adapt to my own life and adapt.
100%.
Rob, in a minute, I'm going to ask you to close us out in prayer if that's cool. But we will be back on Tuesday morning at 9 o'clock with the Sunday Sermon Breakdown, as well as a bunch of other things.
Yeah.
You can join us on Sunday morning, 9 a.m., 11 a.m., 6:30 p.m. But yeah, dude, thank you so much for your time with us this morning. Rob, let's pass it over to you to close.
Yeah.
Once we do the outro bumper, if you can hang around so we can chat after the show as well, that'd be awesome too. But Rob,
Happy to. Yeah, Lord, we are just so thankful that we could spend this time with Te Karere today and just to tautoko what he's saying. Lord, I want to pray as he engages in this this kaupapa, this tikanga, learning to bring these two worldviews into, connection, and to do that for many Maori around the country who will be inspired by this, Lord. As he said, may it not just be him and Brad and a few others that are marching around this country trying to lift this this kaupapa, but others, Lord, that would this would gain momentum, that this would be a journey that inspires others to join that journey and to bring truth of those both worlds together. Lord, I thank you for him and for his korero today, and for what he's brought to us and to those who will listen in the coming days. Lord, I just pray a blessing on him and his whānau as they go along this long journey for the next 4 to 6 years. Lord, inspire him. Lord, be the wind beneath his wings.
Thank you, Lord.
As the Spirit guides him and leads him into all these things. We pray a blessing upon him in Jesus' name. Amen.
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 Oh, so good. Producer
So
Logan,
good.
take us out. You guys have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see
good
you
to see you.
all later. Catch you later. All right.
Just want to
Dude.
say thank you, bro. I've got to go to the next meeting, but
He
Yeah.
doesn't have
Okay.
his headphones in either, so he won't be able to hear your reply.
Yeah.
I'll relay